Hi everyone. So today we're going to be talking about React and mainly Svelte and kind of comparing them a bit. So I've been wanting to play around with Svelte for a long time, and I finally took the time to get into it a bit. So what I did was I took an app that is already written, that I had written in React, which I know well, and I tried kind of rewriting it in Svelte. So despite the clickbaity title, I didn't rewrite the entire app because it's pretty complex, but I did kind of just enough to get a nice view on Svelte and gather some opinions. So this is the React app that I built a subset of it in Svelte. So it's basically a game where you get 16 words and you need to guess the 4 categories that they are divided into. So like there's the numbers category. This is like an example one. So I choose 14, 6, 1, and 90, and they belong to the same category, which is numbers, and that's it. And then you need to find the rest of the categories. You can also select like different boards, so people create their own boards and upload them to the site. So you can see the list of the boards that people created. Yeah, and that's basically it in terms of what I implemented in Svelte. So this is based on Firebase. It uses Firebase as the database. The app is written with Next.js, TypeScript, style components, framer motion for animations, and we're going to see a bit of those stuff right now. There are a few files that I want to show you on the React side. So this is the index page of the Next.js app. And the way that Next.js works is that you have a hook called get server side props, where you're basically fetching data on the server side, and that's being passed into the component that you're rendering. So in this case, we fetch all the IDs that are used to show the list of boards on the side. Then we select a random one, then we go to fetch that random board, and we also fetch the likes for that board. And then we return the board, the IDs, and the likes, and we start rendering. So all these functions, get IDs, get board, get likes, they come from this db.js file. It's pretty simple, it uses Firebase, and then we render this board component, which uses this store. So I wanted to show you the store. It passes the board, the IDs, and the likes to the store. Why do we have to store them? We don't really have to store them, and I would probably do it differently now, but we store them in global state. So this app uses just like a context provider and use reducer. So inside the store, we basically pass the store data into the context. We have this useStore hook. We have state and dispatch that come from useReducer, and we can look a bit at the reducer. So we've got actions like select item, which is when you select a specific square, reset selection for resetting the board, when we found the connection, some local storage stuff as well, when we found the answer, and hydrating the board is like initially when we get the data from the server and we hydrate it, and also from local storage and stuff, I think, and like board. And yeah, that's basically it. So this uses use reducer, and I think that's what I wanted to show. I'm not going to go too much into it, just like maybe show you an example component. So this is the square where you select there's the text and you select it, and it's got the state, and it's a styled component. So according to the state, we style it, we give it a color, and we say if it can be like interacted with. Moving on to the Svelte side. So I chose to use SvelteKit, which is the equivalent of Next.js for Svelte. It's like a complete framework that allows you to build server-side rendered Svelte apps, and also gives you a lot of things out of the box. Also, the code that we're talking about here it's live here on this repo, so I'm gonna be adding the links to the video. Okay, so let's look a bit at SvelteKit. So first of all, it uses Vite in development. So if I write npm run dev super fast, this Svelte server. And this is the app, so pretty much the same thing. We've got our boards, and then we have the board where we can we can select the words of a category. They're selected. I didn't implement the answer input here. And let's look a bit at how this Svelte app looks like. So the SvelteKit app didn't come with these two folders. I added them, but it comes with the routes folder. So the way it does routes, so in Next.js, there's the pages directory where everything you put there becomes a page. And you have like the server-side code running inside the pages. You have the get server-side props function, which runs the server-side code. So in Svelte, it's a bit different. Instead of like having an index.js or TS6, you have a plus page.svelte. So plus page is like the index. And if you want like a nested route or a different route, like about/about, you would create an about folder and add a plus page.svelte file into it. So first thing that struck me at least on Svelte is like the weird syntax, and we're going to see a lot of weird syntax. So this plus thing, like file names that start with a plus, that's already kind of weird. So one thing I didn't say about Svelte is Svelte's whole thing is that it gets compiled. There's a compiler, and basically the compiler compiles away the framework, so you're not downloading a big framework that you need to run the page. It's like everything's already compiled. And that also gives you some performance gains and stuff like that. So we have also a layout file here, which this is the layout, and you can also kind of start to see how a Svelte file looks like. So we've got the JavaScript, or in this case, TypeScript code, the HTML and the CSS all in the same file, which is kind of nice. We've got these lang TS and lang SCSS, which tells SvelteKit that it can compile these. It needs to use like Sass to compile these, or TypeScript. And then in the layout page, we have slots where like this header and footer are going to be rendered for the entire app. And we have slots that each page is going to be going into, some global CSS. And that's it on this side. So we saw on Next.js that the server-side code runs like in the same file. It's written in the same file. So in Svelte, you have a different .server.ts for code that runs only on the server. And here we can see there's a load function, which does what we saw doing in the Next.js app. I just took the DB and the utils files directly from the Next app as is. I didn't really need to change anything there. So it gets the IDs, the board, the likes, and it shuffles the items, which on the Next app I do on the client side. I probably should have done it on the server side as well. And then it returns everything to the component. Let's look a bit at components. CSS in Svelte components is scoped to the component. So like you have in styled components where every CSS you write gets like a random class name and gets scoped. So same thing in Svelte, because it's compiled, they can generate this kind of random class name, and then all the CSS is scoped. So I can just write main, not worrying that someone else styled main tag differently. It's going to be relevant only for the main tag inside this component. So let's look at the grid. Okay, here we start to see kind of more of Svelte's syntax. So what is this $:? So you can think of these values as computed values, basically, but they're computed and reactive. What does that mean? So once I define something with this $:, that means that results is going to get calculated every time that something changes in get sorted items. So it's going to get computed reactively, and it's always going to stay updated. Same thing about matched items, remaining items. I want the UI to re-render once they change. So once I do that with this dollar, they're basically reactive attributes, and the UI will render again whenever they change. So another kind of weird Svelte syntax is these each loops. So in React, you just use JavaScript map, but here we have these each loops. So I'm going over the matched items, which are like the items that I already found a match for, and then over the remaining items. So that's what makes the matched items appear on top, and then the remaining items, and this is the function that sorts them. We're going to talk about what this $answers is in a second. Let's see if I have something else interesting here. Yeah, so these are just regular old styles. Okay, so what is this answers? We haven't looked at the Svelte store yet. So what's kind of the Svelte story for global state management? So we saw in the React app, I used the context provider, but in Svelte, I found it really, really nice. So a store looks like this. Okay, so you define writables and also readables. I don't think I didn't use readables here, but readable is kind of like a computed property as well. It's kind of a reactive property as well that does kind of calculations on these writables. So we have these writables. I chose to model in the state the selection, which is what square the user has selected. I have the answers. Answers is like what the user already found. So this is how the selection is the current selection. Answers is what the user already, the categories that they matched. And show board list is just a Boolean for toggling it on and off. I put it in the global store because it's getting used in a few different places in the component tree. So it's just really easy. So I export them from here. I have these functions that kind of manipulate them, no redux or use reducer things like dispatch and stuff like that. I just call these functions. The functions manipulate the writables using kind of an existing API called update. So this is when I found the connection. This is when I toggle show board list. Resetting the selection. Here's when I chose 4 items. And now I'm checking if they are from the same category. And here is the function for selecting an item. So that's like selecting a square. So each time I select a square, I'll select item, it updates the selection, toggles it on and off. And then if the selection is 4 squares long, so we check if these are a connection. So one thing about Svelte is, so just basically weird syntax and API all around. So this selection is a writable. So you can't just use its value because you're getting a writable and not a value. So if you want to get the actual value, you have a few ways. So you'd expect maybe you would have like selection.value or selection.get even, but no, you need to import a function called get from Svelte store, and that's how you get the actual value, like the array that this selection represents. So that's kind of weird syntax choice, but there's also another way of getting this value, and that's using this dollar. So you can see I'm importing answers from the store. So answers is the writable, but I want to get the actual answer array. So I do that by doing dollar. So once I do dollar answers, I'm getting the answers array, and it's also reactive. So once I update the answers, it's gonna reactively recalculate results and update the UI and do everything that it needs. So the row isn't an interesting component. It just, I've got some logic that I don't think I'm using at all, but it just iterates over the squares and renders them. And let's look at the square. So we've got a couple of reactive props here. This is a function that's available in our template. So I just put a dynamic class according to the item state, and I also have a dynamic style. So I'm giving it like the background color according to this BG color. Okay, and here are Svelte directives. So you've got this on click, so or on key press. Yeah, and that's what I want to show here. And one last component that I wanted to show is the board list. Okay, because here, first of all, this is kind of a nice Svelte utility directive or whatever you call it. So you've got class colon whatever, which basically lets you toggle, because it's like a really common UI pattern to toggle a class like selected or open. So you've got this class open, and then it's basically bound to Boolean, and whenever it's true, so you're going to get the open class. So this is for animating. And also, I was looking for like a on click outside directive. So I can do this where if I'm selecting the board and clicking outside, so I get this callback and it closes. So I was just looking online and I found an example. So the way these custom directives work is, so I'm not sure if on click outside, maybe this is like Svelte, a Svelte thing, I'm not sure. And then I have this directive, click outside. So sorry, I don't really know how this works. I kind of copy pasted it. Yeah, so I can't give you that, but this is kind of the way to attach custom properties and custom event handlers and stuff to nodes. And this basically checks if I'm clicking outside of the element. So just run whatever function you're getting in the handle click. Oh, okay, so it's gonna dispatch the click outside event, which I'm guessing is this. Okay, so this is how it works. Basically, we're dispatching an event on the node, and it's a custom event called click outside, and then it's like on click outside. Oh, okay, so we have to use click outside. Sorry, I'm figuring this out live. And then it runs the callback that we've passed. So I think that is everything I wanted to show. So let's talk a bit about TypeScript. So we already saw that once you define export let IDs, like if we're talking about the board list, so TypeScript automatically knows that it's expecting a prop called IDs. And where are we rendering it? In board. So if I'm gonna like delete the IDs from here, so it's gonna tell me you're missing the IDs prop. So that's a nice touch. And also what I found very, very cool was SvelteKit's TypeScript story for the page data. So let's see how that works. So if I'm going back to the page server file, so I'm defining the load as a page server load type, which gets this generic output type, which is what I defined here. And what is this dollar types? So when I was looking at Svelte apps, I saw a lot of these dollar folders, and I guess it's like a convention, but I couldn't find these folders. And then I realized that people are defining these aliases. So you've got the Svelte config file where you define aliases. So a lot of people define like $lib as the lib folder, or $models. That's like the common ones that I saw. But I couldn't find these dollar types. Like I was seeing people use it, but I didn't see where it was. So apparently you need to run a script which looks over the types, and then it generates this folder. So yeah, and once it generates this folder, um, that's basically how Svelte types this. So now, if I go to the page.svelte, so I'm also like importing the page data from Svelte. I'm telling data that it's of type from dollar types. I'm telling the data that it's of type page data. And basically you can see page data already knows what's being returned. So like everything here is already typed, which is very nice. So I found that very cool. Thing I wanted to talk about is animations. So Svelte has animations baked in, like it's baked into the framework, and I really wanted to experience that. So I've got like a few animations here. So one is like the layout animation. So when you select like a correct category, so they kind of animate into place. So we're gonna see that. Okay, so you see this dropped here and it's kind of animated into place. And the way this is done is using Framer Motion's animate shared layout. So pretty much to achieve this, all you need to do is kind of wrap it with animate shared layout and then just add the layout prop on, like this container is a motion.div, and you add the layout prop to it and also to the row and also to the square, and that basically makes sure that it animates and it kind of does everything for you. So I was thinking that maybe in the Svelte example, this will be with Svelte's animation API. But what I saw is that the Svelte example for like animating a shared layout uses Framer Motion as well. So there's like a Framer Svelte, which is a port of Framer Motion for Svelte. And I was trying to make that work. It was kind of the same, but I didn't really manage to make it work. So I kind of gave up on it. So yeah, so I was really hoping to play with the animations and stuff. But yeah, I guess it's nice that they have Framer Motion because it's an amazing library. To summarize this video and give some conclusions about working with Svelte. So on the good side, it has very nice developer experience, like things we saw, how simple it is to define props and define things that you can use in the template, the scoped styles, the nice TypeScript support, how it's really simple to update values and get like reactive values. Basically just update the value in your UI updates, so no set state and stuff like that. So it's all kind of very straightforward. I like the state management as well. I know it was a really small scale app, so I didn't kind of reach the harder problems that people reach when working on large apps, but the state management looked really nice. I can just create a store with some writables, import them, update them. That was nice. And now to things that I like less. So first of all, the syntax is kind of ugly. I guess you probably get used to it, but like you're used to working in React, I'm used to, and working just with JavaScript, which I know. And here I kind of need to figure out how to do everything, which makes sense because it's first time. I guess you get used to that. But like all these dollars and stuff everywhere, like jQuery, and I don't know, I didn't really like looking at it. Um, Googling questions, like simple questions, I couldn't really easily find definitive answers for. Like what's the use effect equivalent in Svelte, for example, or I kind of needed to look at a lot of, I need to look at some example apps and code, and I couldn't find the answers so easily that I was looking for. Also, when something broke for me, it was kind of, I didn't know where to look for because it's kind of magical, but actually didn't happen so much. So it happened like once. So it was pretty smooth sailing most of the time. So I really wanted to get into the animations because like Svelte has all its animations baked in. So I tried looking into it a bit, but it looked a bit complicated, so I put it aside. Maybe in the future I'll get to experience that.